Hey, it's Amethyst Virgo. Today I'm talking about retrogrades in the natal chart. This was requested by a few subscribers, and also I noticed probably the months of May to June, I had like 5 to 6 chart clients back to back with a lot of retrograde energy. 3 or more, some people 4 retrogrades, one person or two, I think it was like 5 retrograde planets. So I was like, and then, some of you are curious about this. I'm like, I have to do this video. There's probably going to be a part 2 about this. So I do want to try to keep this as succinct and to the point as possible. But there also will be some things I have to share just for us to all be on the same page. If you're on the wait list for a reading, you already know, I've already communicated with you that you will be contacted soon for your August reading. I'm taking a break in July from most readings, especially from advanced or astro hours, unless there's, some need for me to do some reading for someone. But I do need an energetic break so that way I can preserve myself and also work on some content and really refine some things. There will, moving forward, be limited advanced readings. Advanced are the chart analysis. That's the 10 to 14 page report about your chart that will break down each house and your birth date and your all of those things that you guys who have gotten readings already know, where everything is broken down from the houses to your birth date, your decan, life path number. That's taking a lot of time, and it means I can't work with as many people. So I do have to limit that option and revamp some of my prices. Even some of my clients have been like, you need to charge more because this was really good. And this is like, I really appreciate people who reach out and give me the feedback. Because I'm very, very thorough, but because I'm so thorough, this is taking a lot of time. And as I shared before, I have a full-time job, I have kids, I have content to do, I have so many different things to do. So I will be revamping services and prices, still keeping some prices in a affordable ballpark for people because I do think that's important. Just look out for that. There's going to be some links below. You can check them out if you're interested in any more of my content. I don't want to overdo this conversation right here. I know some people might be like, I don't want to hear this, or I already know this. Here's one thing I didn't understand until I actually had a bigger following on YouTube. Sometimes, and by bigger, obviously, I mean, mine's growing steadily, so I appreciate that. But meaning I started out very, 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 with a very low amount of people. It took a long time for me to get to this point. The point I'm making is that with YouTube, like sometimes we say something that you already know because we're getting new subscribers every day. And sometimes people will ask questions of things that we've already shared. So that is why YouTubers do that, because they want to just hit everybody on time with the same message. Next, enjoy the content, please. You guys know that I do respond to comments. I do engage with people on here, but again, the more I'm getting more subscribers, the more I have to remind people that I cannot interpret your placements via YouTube comments. So if you give me like all, the sun and the degrees and the house, I don't mind that. I like when people tell me their stuff. You can sure tell me. You can definitely add that in the comment. That doesn't bother me. But when people ask me to interpret, that's a little bit different because for me, I'm a very visual person. Yes, I'm very wordy and I'm word-based, but I'm visual when it comes to astrology. And if I can't see the planets in the chart, and my mind really computes it that way, and then I interpret it as words. So sometimes when people give me a lot of their stuff without me seeing it, it makes me feel like I'm back in school when I used to get word problems and freak out. Right? You'd be like, Sally's going to the store for a quart of milk, but she actually needs 3/4 of milk at home to make a cake. What do you do? I'm like, I don't know, because my mind doesn't work that way. So that's what I just want to share. Feel free to share anything that's appropriate and that is on topic in the comments. Feel free. I do engage with the comments, but I just have to remind folks that I work on accuracy, and so sometimes it makes me uncomfortable because I'm like, I'm going to miss something if I try to interpret something really complicated for someone, because that requires interpretation. So let me move on. If you want to check, again, I'm going to have the link below to my podcast. It's the easiest way to listen to it is on Spotify, but also if you have the Anchor app, you can search me, and I have some topics that you might be interested in. Now, is it really going backward? Now, I know the thing with the word backward. I'm a wordsmith, remember? Well, I think I am. I teach reading. But in grammar rules, you can use either one. Anyway, so you'll see me saying backwards, you'll see me saying backward, it doesn't matter. The idea of a planet going backwards, because sometimes I feel like backwards makes more sense, right? But in America, we don't know. But anyway, the idea of a planet going backwards is the appearance in relation to its orbit. So it's not really literally going backwards. It's not going out into the abyss, but it's the appearance of it. So that when it appears in that way, it's called retrograde. RX is the abbreviation for retrograde. If you're not sure, if you're like, RX, what's she talking about? Prescription? No, RX is the abbreviation for retrograde. And if there is no abbreviation next to the planet, then it's direct, right? We can consider it direct. And most planets are direct most of the time. Now, what I thought to myself is, what is the astrological reason for this? Because it's very scientific, in my opinion, to say, oh, it's just the appearance. It's not really doing it. It didn't explain to me, why would that affect us, though? If something appears to be something that it's not, like, why would that affect us in our charts? You know, my personal theory is that perception creates reality, and that when that, we have to understand that energetically, that is going to create some type of difference in the expression of the planets. Right? And so that what we appear to see can create an effect. That's the way my mind wraps around it. Because when you look it up, even when you look in some books, it's like, yeah, retrograde, but it's not really retrograde. But it's like, then why does it have an effect on us? That's a whole nother bigger thing to think about. But that's one way I made sense of it in my mind for anyone else who's wondering the same thing. Now, those of you who've been in the astrology community, the spiritual community for enough time might have this expression very often and like, no, that's not what that means. RX, you know, I'm just abbreviating to keep it easy. Am I doomed? Is it, you know, is it doomed? Is it, you know, is my life just not going to work out for me? Study the charts of people who have lived great lives full of accomplishments and purpose. I would say no. Like, I study not just clients' charts, but celebrities, famous people's charts, politicians, musicians, the range. Whatever I can get my hands on that's accurate, I study it as a learning tool. So I would not say you're doomed. There's plenty of people who have, you know, that you might even admire, but they have retrograde planets. Now, you may have to have more of a laser focus on certain planets. If you have Mercury in retrograde, Venus in retrograde, personal planets, Mars in retrograde. What I would do a thorough analysis in your chart, right? So if you have 5 retrograde planets, you have to address that. I'm not going to be like, well, you know, retrograde's not that big of a deal. We do have to address it. Early on in my astrological experience, in my practice, I wasn't worried about retrogrades. I was trying to understand what the planets meant. Okay, once you understand what planets mean, what placements mean thoroughly, when you apply retrograde energy, you now understand that. So if anyone who's new, I always say, get the basics first. You don't have to worry about aspects and degrees and this random asteroid from, you know, we don't have to do all that. You want to understand the basics, and then you can layer it on. And you can learn whatever way works best for you. But that's just what I suggest for folks. Now, sometimes you might read a description and find it doesn't make sense to you. You're like, wait, I read this description of this planet and it doesn't resonate with me. It can sometimes be because it's retrograde. It also sometimes can be because you might have an aspect to a retrograde planet. If someone has Venus trine Saturn, but Saturn's retrograde or something like that, that can also have an effect. That is why chart interpretation is very important. I always tell people, at a certain point, listen, I still watch astrological videos from certain people that I respect their work. I still do. But at a certain point, even when we read a lot and when we watch a lot, we're going to need to interpret something fully to understand it. Now, I gave an example of a Pluto in Sagittarius retrograde person. I like Pluto and Sag. I'm the Pluto and Scorpio generation. I like Pluto and Scorpio too. But I like Pluto and Sag energy. When I see it, I'm like, if this person works this right, you really can have a lot of influence over beliefs and views that people have. And I don't mean that in a take them over type of way. But if you want to be influential in if you work in the field in that way, if you feel that is your calling, you can have great powers in that. The issue sometimes can be, if the person might see that Pluto in retrograde description and say, that's not me. And what I will say is, like, it really depends on someone's life experiences. All right. If I saw someone with this that's 18 years old, well, you're not gonna, there's certain planets you're not going to master until a certain age. And even if you get to an older age, you might not master it until, it's so many different layers to understanding things. Or you can have a person who just simply isn't willing to make drastic changes in their lives. Let me give an example. You can have a person who maybe has a lot of life experience. So it's not always age dependent, though, even though that is a factor. You can have a person whose truth has been controlled by family or community. There's no way that they can actually use Pluto and Sagittarius energy in a way in which it can benefit them. So what happens is Pluto, power, control. Their views have been shaped and controlled by the people of their family. So this person may have to wait until a certain point in their life, maybe a transit, where they let go and transform their beliefs and say, wait a minute, this is wrong. I've been learning the whole thing. And they're probably going to go to the extreme, because Pluto can be extreme energy. So those are examples of you don't resonate with something because you haven't experienced it, you haven't tried it, or simply the environment around you does not nurture that ability. Now in chart readings, people who've made it a point to tell me their journey has been difficult, that life has been a bit difficult for them, tend to have 4 or more retrograde planets, sometimes 3. The people who tell me the most, like, hey, this is a struggle, life is a struggle, I do tend to see retrograde energy 9 times out of 10, those folks, okay? Now, I look at retrogrades as detours. All right, you need to go to work tomorrow. You're still going to make it to work, are you not? Right? But that detour means you got to go maybe down the street. So it adds 10 minutes to your commute, but you still know you have to do that. So do I look at retrogrades, or do I look at anything else, difficult planets, challenging planets, 12th house energy is impossible to recover from? Absolutely not. Because I have 2 retrograde planets in my chart, and I have not experienced anything really crazy with either of them. I have had to accept them for what they are, especially since they're, outer planets are probably going to cause a different reaction than the inner planets. I'll talk about that in a moment. Here are some general time periods. Being born the same year as someone does not always mean the same thing, okay? Because you might be like, oh yes, we're both Mars and Aquarius, but, look at that transit. If that person was born after you, right? And that cycle ended, they don't have it in retrograde. So that is sometimes the other differences besides decans and other situations and moon signs, where we can have a similar, we can have similarities with someone else, but it might not be this. It might not express the same. The sun and the moon cannot be in retrograde. Okay, we know that. Well, maybe some don't. That's cool if you didn't. This is general. As you know, all transits are kind of give or take. You can have some years where it was 119 days back in, I don't know, like 1902. You get what I'm saying? Like, you can sometimes have subtle differences in these. These are all approximate days, okay? Because we're not dealing with just this linear time. We're dealing with the cycle of planets. And when you're dealing with cycles of planets, sometimes it's not this exact thing. You get what I'm saying? That's why sometimes you'll see even like the cusps get real dodgy, where like sometimes somebody will say, well, one astrology book said I'm a Leo and one said I'm a Cancer, right? That you can get into that cuspy type of stuff. General tendencies. All right, these are general. Obviously, when you get your chart interpreted, or you dig deeper, you're going to see the other part of this. Obviously, the sign is going to matter too. So in general, Mercury retrograde, not as fast of a communicator. I was recently having a conversation with Planet Dominique. She is head over to her content. She is a wonderful astrologer, and she also has a podcast and a lot of astrological services as well. We're talking about Mercury in retrograde. Well, we were talking about a lot of things. But one thing in particular, we're talking about, when you have Mercury in retrograde. And I said, I do think sometimes Mercury in retrograde, people who literally just have Mercury in retrograde, it sometimes can create the 12th house effect. So I don't have my Mercury in retrograde, but I have my Mercury in the 12th house. And the 12th house Mercury, it's a slower process to knowing what you want to say. Now, it depends on situations. Mercury in 12th, for me, it depends if I'm in my comfort zone. Right now, I'm at home and I can say whatever I want. So I'm not holding back. Whereas in person, remember 12th house energy, it sometimes has to bring itself out. So that's just a tidbit. But the point with Mercury retrograde is ideas are more internal, similar to the 12th house Mercury. Meaning it may take the person more time to get their thoughts together. Have you ever seen a person pause and then say the most beautiful thing, or pause and say the thing that makes the most sense? The person who's talking the fastest, I talk a little fast, depends on what's going on. It's not going to change. It's not going to change. It is what it is, if you don't know. But what I'm saying is, like, it depends on what's going on. So if I know what I'm talking about, I'm excited. I'm Mercury and Leo. I'm going to talk fast, okay? If I don't know what I'm talking about, I'm going to slow down. And when you slow down, now you can be a great mastermind. Me, I can talk fast, but when I have time to think about my responses, when someone gives me time to think and then come back to them with an idea or an answer, it's great. Thinking on my feet, I can do it. It's not my preference. So there is an ability to process, even though Mercury's in retrograde. This is talking about the natal chart. I'm not talking about the transit. And I'm focusing a lot on Mercury retrograde because that's what's going to be the most common sometimes with some people's charts. Actually, it depends. I've seen some outer planets be retrograde a lot lately for some people's charts. It also forces more concentration, so it can be good in that regard. Venus retrograde, in charts, I don't see this as much, but it is possible. These people may shy away from more romantic aspects of relationships. Or, there's a different level of valuing what we assume someone will value. We assume with Venus what someone's going to value. We assume with Venus that everybody wants a relationship. Everybody wants something in particular, but the retrograde creates a different type of connection and different type of expectation when it comes to the sense of valuing either possessions, Taurus, Venus Taurus, or Libra partnership. A person can feel an aversion. They might not understand their full values or the meaning of relationships. If someone has a really interesting chart, they have a lot of Uranus energy to 7th house or 5th house or 8th house, and a lot of Aquarian energy, they might not even want relationships. They might say, I don't want to do this at all, right? Mars retrograde struggles with actualization and creating major waves in their own lives. Sometimes, again, it depends. You can have a person who does make a lot of waves in their own life, but they feel like the decisions aren't theirs. Maybe they have Mars square Saturn or something like that, and they feel like the decisions aren't theirs. It's the person who is successful but stops. And they say, I never wanted to do that in the first place. That was just pressure on me. I didn't want to do that in the first place. Little urge to be dominant. I say this personally. I feel like I don't have Mars in retrograde, but I've seen it, and I think it can often feel like they're riding the backseat of their own car. Yes, because I know someone has Mars in retrograde, Mars and Saturn in retrograde, and it's learning your own power. It's a struggle for some people to. Now again, it will depend on life experience. Your environment will play a role. So I want us to be clear on that. But I've seen Mars in retrograde stunt someone, right? Stunt their ability to take control over their own life for a long period of time. Saturn retrograde, difficulty accepting challenges. This is the person. Now you got to be careful. Depends on what else is in your chart. You can have people who feel like life is just difficult. I can't do it. There's nothing I can do right. Because Saturn wants achievement. So it depends on what else is in the chart. But we want to be careful with Saturn retrograde energy because you don't want to become despondent, depressed, inactive, right? Of course, there are ways to cope with depression. Of course, we've probably all gone through periods of time like that. But with Saturn, it's instead of the person like, I'm just going to rise to the challenge. I'm just going to get this done. Yes, it's hard. We're just going to do it. It fosters a different experience there. Jupiter retrograde could be sometimes. Now again, Jupiter is not going to. It can be a person who, in extreme situations that feel unlucky. This person could feel unlucky if they have Saturn and Jupiter in the same house. This could be a person who doesn't understand their own luck. What if they have both in retrograde? Saturn, Jupiter in retrograde, right? That could definitely happen. Difficulty understanding their gifts or understanding their influence, right? Because we do have to understand, I think last year, Saturn and Jupiter were in retrograde again, but they were in the same sign. So some kids that were born last summer might have Saturn and Jupiter in retrograde in the house. But inability to see the positive at first or accept their luck. I have Jupiter in retrograde too. It is not really hindered. It's in the 6th house, Jupiter in Aquarius. I have Neptune and Jupiter in retrograde. In my experience, the outer planets are not going to create the same effect. Now, Jupiter and Neptune are going to be more, or all these planets over here. So Jupiter and Saturn are social planets. They are also outer planets. They're social because they're a little bit closer in transit to the personal. Not a lot. But Pluto, forget about it. Pluto's transit is ridiculous, right? Like, that's the slowest moving planet. So my point is that you may not always hardcore now relate to retrogrades. However, I will say with Jupiter in retrograde, once I realized I had a retrograde, it was like, oh, I had to lean into the energy of where this Jupiter was. I didn't recognize that this was a gift. I didn't recognize the Jupiter Aquarian energy at first. You get what I'm saying? So Jupiter may not be the worst thing to have in retrograde is what I'm trying to say compared to some of these other planets. But again, it will depend. That's why I gave the example of Saturn and Jupiter in retrograde in the same house. But again, Jupiter offers something to Saturn. So it's not bad if they're in the same house, but it is something to note. Uranus in retrograde can be the person has difficulty accepting their individuality, and feelings of non-acceptance, intense feelings of confinement. Okay, that can definitely be something that happens over time. Slight delay in actualizing or recognizing your impact and true wishes in life. Yep. Neptune. This could be, you know, Neptune can mean a little bit of delusion. You can have a person, depending on other factors, in a fog that they have been, it's like, it could be a person with strong aspects to Neptune who has felt like, wow, my whole life has been a lie. That's an extreme situation, but if certain factors in the chart line up, you can have a person that experiences that. Deception, something that held them back from the truth. So we have to understand Neptune in retrograde is not always, oh, holding back your creativity and you can be more creative. Sometimes it means like not understanding reality, not really seeing things for what it is. For some of us, it's more so we have to tap into our own dreams and realize they're possible. And by dreams, no, I don't mean your wildest dreams, but I do think that some of the things that we want for our lives are possible. We just have to be realistic. That's a Neptune and Capricorn thing. I keep telling y'all that. Neptune and Capricorns, that's what we have to do. Pluto retrograde. Now, transformations can feel rather forced or painful. Like it's the Pluto and Sagittarius example I gave. They feel like, wow, I've been indoctrinated. My parents or my family or my spouse or whatever, like I had to believe what they believed, and you know, I wasn't able to find my own truth. You know, it's a little bit more intense. And the thing with the retrograde is you can feel a little bit trapped in it and not moving forward. That's the biggest thing, not moving forward. Refusal to accept drastic change. Some people, Pluto in retrograde, don't accept it. They're afraid of anything too different. You might have to move across the country. You might have to move to a different country in order to actualize some of your goals. Some people's mission, you're supposed to go get that opportunity over there, but you're afraid to do it, or that person meets the person that's the right person for them, but you're so afraid of things from the past that you know, maybe it's a Pluto and Scorpio person retrograde or something like that, and they refuse to open up in the relationship and to sabotage it, because Pluto can be known for sabotage. So we're gonna move on. I've talked about this before in all of the North Node videos, but the South Node can be an indicator of the past life. Do you really have to hardcore believe in past lives? As I always said, not necessarily, but I do find it is important for people willing to accept, hey, I might have had a past life. And it's up to the individual how far they want to go later on into their understanding of their past life circumstances. So with that said, the South Node representing the past life, any planets near it are also going to help us tell the story. But then the retrograde planets can help us see potential karmic energy as well. So we can interpret the retrograde planets just as it is in your life right now, but we also can get an understanding perhaps of any leftover karmic energy that you might need to resolve and focus on. So sometimes I feel like the retrograde serves as a signal for some people. That's why it might not always devastate certain people. It may not always be that serious for some people. Some people's charts, it's like, hey, as a reminder, work on this. So that's one way to look at it as well. That is more complex interpretation due to the arc's planets often being in houses different than the South Node. So that does require an understanding of the South Node and then full interpretations if you want to go that route with looking at the retrograde planets as a part of this past life. If you want to go that route, not everyone chooses to do that. Asteroids and nodes. Asteroids can be retrograde as well. Lilith as well. I didn't put that on here. But let's talk about our main guys, you know, our main folks. Actually, it's the ladies. These are the ladies. Except for Chiron, Juno, Pallas, Vesta, Ceres. Those are the ladies. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let's do it like that. Juno, Chiron, Pallas, Vesta, Ceres can be in retrograde. I'm not going to go into depth what that means right now, but I also want to share, for instance, Chiron retrograde. When I see someone's Chiron retrograde, that does signal to me, whoa, everything with Chiron, let's talk about. When Chiron has a significant place in someone's chart, a lot of aspects to Chiron, retrograde Chiron, we got to talk, because for some people, how do I say this? For some people, you just figured it out on your own. You just figured it out on your own. Before I was even fully working on my Chiron, I kind of was doing it. I just wasn't doing it as much as I should have. You get what I'm saying? But we also would have to look at what aspects are to your Chiron. An example would be you may feel the circumstance takes longer to resolve. It's not like the person that I tell them, hey, your Chiron's in such and such. This might mean that. You might want to do this. And they're like, cool, got you. I already know how to do this. Great, right? that's usually not that type of conversation. Or with retrograde, you do have to work a little bit harder, perhaps, to really heal this. Now, again, interpretation is important. That's what I tell people, because we can see, is Chiron next to a planet? Is that giving us another understanding of why this Chiron has not been resolved? An example I just did on my other channel, Amethyst Virgo readings. I'm just going to do like celebrity chart readings and maybe some tarot readings over there. Is that Britney Spears has Chiron and Taurus in the 8th house. Possessions. Her possessions are not hers. They're always taken from her, right? Or she never had a chance to enjoy her money just for herself. She was either working and giving some money to her family, or working in Kevin Federline, you know, that relationship where, you know, she made more. And that's not a problem, but I'm just saying, in her experience, that didn't end up so well for her, because remember, she had to end up paying child support to him, and that was a whole battle. But now her father in the conservatorship, her Chiron is in retrograde. So for Britney, unfortunately, it's not the same as somebody that went through this time for about 3 years. You could, you know, another person's chart, they went maybe went through the same thing as Britney for about 3 years. Britney is stuck. It feels like she's stuck, feeling control. Her finances are controlled. 8th house, other people's money. Taurus, which you made. Listen, check that Britney video out. The nodes will always be marked on a chart as retrograde, so don't forget about those. They're always going to be retrograde. You know, they're always going to show up as that way. My professional opinion on some things. Mutable retrogrades may be the most difficult. The energy can feel like quicksand. And I know someone might say, but what about cardinal energy? The thing with cardinal energy is you at least might see a person attempting. You might at least see, you know, it's like attempting. It just might be like, let's fix what you're doing. It's not that you're wrong in doing something. Mutable energy is I love mutable energy for the sheer fact of knowing how to be adaptable, knowing when to get with the times, knowing when to say, oh, great, we're going to do it differently this way. And then you just, you know, especially the creative people who have mutable energy. That's beautiful. The problem sometimes with mutable energy, if it's not anchored, there can be issues. Okay. Somebody got mad at me one time when I said something about the Gemini Pisces, the Pisces Sun, Gemini Moon, or something like that. If that mutable energy is not anchored, and I'm mutable, but I'm Virgo and Virgo Sun rising, and then mutable, and then Sag Moon. But Virgo is a little bit different, as we know, because it's mutable, but it's Earth, so it's different sometimes. But what I said was, it's true. Mutable Moon Sun people have to be careful. We have to have an understanding of where we're standing, and some sign combinations are going to be more apt to change too much. That's what I even know plenty of clients that admit the same thing, and they have that energy in there. Anyway, point is, mutable retrogrades, watch out for that. We want to work through that. What does that energy mean? What can it look like? Because it can feel like you want to go forward, but then mutable, sometimes it's difficult to know what direction you're going in. So mutable energy can be tamed. It can be channeled. It certainly can, but that's a different conversation. Now, planets in retrograde in the angular houses, or the cardinal houses, as some people might say, 1, 4, 7, 10, they have more of a direct effect. So that's also why some of us may not always resonate hardcore, or not feel it as much if it's not one of these houses. However, again, the whole chart will tell us what you feel the most. Okay? If you continue to consider something negative, yes, this is the whole thing. So, I'm not a fluffy, feel-good type of person, meaning I do believe in reality. And I'm the type of person like, but we got to do something about it. And I think that's really, I don't know if it's my moon, it's like, even when I do sometimes think that I sometimes can be too realistic, or I can be too, kind of like, I see the reality and what the problems are and things, but it doesn't get me as down. I guess that's a Sag Moon thing of just like, I'm always on to the next thing. Okay, well, we're just going to do this. We're just going to do that. And through the Virgo energy, I actually do it. Now, here's the thing. That's what I'm saying. So I'm not telling you be positive, be positive, be positive. That's the only thing to do. I'm saying let's get some work done. Let's work on something. If something's negative, it's going to stay negative. And forget a chart, it's going to be negative in your life. If anything in your life you refuse to address, if it's that serious, address it. That's what I would say. All right, deal with it, work with it. Let's work on what we can do. And guess what? You have to understand, some things are going to take 5 years, some things are going to take 1. Some things you can change in a month. You can change your habits in a month. If you're trying to get healthier, you can change your habits in a month. But that's different. If someone's trying to lose 200 pounds, it's not going to take a month. if someone's trying to move up the ladder at work, but they start off entry level, that might take you about 4 to 3 years. I don't know, or depending on your field. So that's what I'm saying. Like, we have to be realistic, and sometimes people want it now. I want it now. I want success now. I want my problem solved now. Some things in life are a process. Next, what I'll say is this. I would say, you know, if you've ever bought a book, and it's a new book versus an old book or a used book, right? So the new book is fresh, it's clean, there's no dents in it, there's no creases in it, great. The old book, or the book from the thrift store, you might take better care of it, because, you know, it can get tattered. If you don't, you know, if you're just tossing it around, if you're, you know, leaving coffee mugs on it, you might have to be a little bit more aware. So that's the analogy I would give you about the retrograde. Yeah, I don't think everyone has to freak out about it. Just be aware of it. Understand the transits that hit in that planet. Understand what that house is inside and out. And ask yourself, does this really affect me that much? Or is it just something minor? Because it could be minor for some people. Lastly, individuals should understand the full range, I just said that, of the planet, okay? Before we worry about the retrograde, let's understand the planet, and then we can see, okay, what is missing? Because a lot of retrograde people who have retrograde planets always feel slighted sometimes in the full expression of that energy, or they feel like they just don't resonate with it. So let's fully understand the house, the sign, the planet, the house, planet, sign, all of that, the aspects to that retrograde planet. Then we can now dive into what we may need to do. Let me give you an example. Who do you think this is about? Okay. The person with Jupiter and Aquarius in retrograde, okay, in the 6th house, wants to use their associations at work to their benefit. So I have Jupiter and Aquarius in the 6th house, retrograde. But I've always, now I look back, Jupiter and Aquarius has always helped me. It's always helped me in work situations from the time I was a teenager working. Now, I never realized it. But again, as a teenager, I understood astrology, but I did sun sign stuff as a teenager. And then lean into it more and see the ability to problem solve and be influential as your gift. A Jupiter can be your gift. I know we sometimes say luck. I've found more luck in also calling it your gift, what you had to give to the world. Jupiter is not always assigned to your personality unless you see Jupiter as making aspects to descendant, or Jupiter's in the 1st house or something like that. But what I sometimes can see is that it's your gift. Tell it, be different, be productive at work, have the solutions at work, lean into that, because even when you consider yourself, even if you consider yourself introverted, people are going to notice your actions. That's what we have to understand, is introvert claiming you're an introvert. But what are you doing? You could be an introvert and people leave you alone more if you actually know what you're doing, right? Like, anyway, like that's just life 101. But all other placements in consideration, I didn't find that I had workplace drama like other people may have. So I'm like, oh, that's Jupiter. But again, the retrograde, it didn't. But also the retrograde, it took me a while to start my own business. And 6th house can be small business. Small business is more 6. Or shops, stores, and things can also be 6th house. 6th house is daily life. I didn't at first realize that I could have a different daily life. I thought, oh, I just go to work and I just work for who I work for. But then I started to realize, wait, I need more freedom. So that's how the retrograde impacted me. Whatever the planet represents, considered to be compromised, hidden, confused, or untapped, right? You pick what that is. What is your experience? You don't have to say, oh, this is horrible, but maybe it's hidden. Maybe you need to work a little bit more on it. Those with Saturn and retrograde in the natal chart, I always tell y'all, when that Saturn return hits, please pay attention. Please pay attention, okay? If you ignored a part of your development, it may be more pronounced, right? I know some people in particular that have said they've had particularly rough Saturn retrogrades. Their planet that's already in retrograde, right? Now, I'll do a different video about that. Another thought that I had. But progression charts. At any given time, your progression chart might not have that planet, that natal planet, as retrograde. So any given time there are transits direct, right? This is why I don't want us to say it's all going to be doom and gloom, because you might hit a transit that actually improves the expression of that. And then also what I say, it's like saying that retrogrades are going to ruin your life completely wouldn't make sense if it doesn't completely ruin people's lives of people who don't have any retrograde planets, if that makes sense, right? The retrogrades, a bunch of planets in retrograde at one time doesn't necessarily ruin every other person's life. So you having natal retrograde planets does not mean it's ruining your life, but it might mean we pay attention to those planets, you pay attention to those transits, you pay attention to the work that you're doing in order to see how can you improve the expression of those energies? And that was it. Thank you again for watching. Again, please, if you're interested, check out the links below. Make sure that you're subscribed to the newsletter if you're interested, and also check out the podcast.